The Pentagon just shattered Donald Trump's carefully constructed narrative about Iran, and what they revealed exposes not just a lie, but a pattern of deception that threatens to unravel America's entire Middle East strategy. In a stunning admission that sent shockwaves through Washington, senior Pentagon officials confirmed what Trump has desperately tried to hide. Iran's military capabilities are far more advanced than the American public has been told. Their defense systems proved devastatingly effective against recent strikes, and the former president's claims of crippling Iranian power were nothing more than dangerous fantasy. This is not just another political scandal. This is the moment when decades of American arrogance collided with Iranian reality, and the collision exposes everything wrong with how Washington approaches the Middle East. The documents leaked from the Pentagon paint a picture so different from Trump's bombastic declarations that they might as well be describing two different countries. While Trump stood before cameras boasting about obliterating Iranian defenses and reducing their military to rubble, Pentagon analysts were privately documenting something completely opposite. Iranian air defense systems, supposedly destroyed in American strikes, remained fully operational. Underground missile facilities that Trump claimed were neutralized continued producing precision-guided weapons at accelerating rates. The vaunted Iranian nuclear program, which Trump insisted was set back by years, actually expanded its enrichment capacity during his maximum pressure campaign. Every major claim Trump made about weakening Iran was contradicted by the Pentagon's own classified assessments, and now those assessments are public. The emperor has no clothes, and the entire world is watching him stand naked. Before we dive deeper into this devastating exposure, I need you to understand something crucial. What you're about to hear will never make it onto mainstream American news networks. The establishment media that amplified every one of Trump's lies about Iran will bury this story because admitting the truth means confessing their own complicity in deceiving the American people. That's why channels like this exist, to bring you the analysis and evidence that powerful interests want suppressed. If you value truth over propaganda, hit that subscribe button right now and turn on notifications. We're building a community of informed citizens who refuse to swallow establishment lies, and your support keeps this channel independent and fearless. Now let's expose exactly what the Pentagon revealed and why it's causing panic in Washington. The story begins with Trump's maximum pressure campaign against Iran, launched after he withdrew from the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action in May 2018. Trump promised that crushing sanctions combined with threats of military annihilation would bring Iran to its knees within months. He predicted economic collapse, social upheaval, regime change, and Iranian surrender to American demands. Fast forward to today, and every single one of those predictions proved catastrophically wrong. Iran's economy, while certainly strained, never collapsed. The government never faced serious internal threats to its stability. Iranian missile programs accelerated rather than halted. Most embarrassingly for Trump, Iran expanded its nuclear program beyond levels that existed before the deal Trump abandoned. The maximum pressure campaign achieved maximum failure, but Trump never admitted it. Instead, he doubled down on lies, claiming victory while Pentagon analysts watched in horror as Iranian capabilities grew stronger. The Pentagon documents reveal specific incidents where Trump's public statements contradicted classified intelligence assessments. In January 2020, after Iranian ballistic missiles struck the Ain al-Assad air base in Iraq in retaliation for the assassination of General Qasem Soleimani, Trump declared that no Americans were harmed and Iran's attack was ineffective. The Pentagon knew differently. Over 100 American service members suffered traumatic brain injuries from the precision strikes. More importantly, Iranian missiles demonstrated accuracy that stunned American military planners. These were not the crude, inaccurate weapons that decades of propaganda had conditioned Americans to expect. These were precision-guided ballistic missiles that hit their intended targets with circular error probable measurements under 10 meters. Iranian forces had deliberately chosen not to maximize casualties, but they demonstrated they could have turned the base into a massacre site if they wished. Trump's dismissive response was not just false, but dangerous, creating false confidence that would lead to strategic miscalculation. The documents also exposed Trump's lies about Iranian air defenses. Throughout his presidency, Trump and his advisors insisted that American stealth aircraft could penetrate Iranian airspace at will, and that Iranian air defense systems posed no meaningful threat to American air superiority. Pentagon assessments told a starkly different story. Iranian integrated air defense networks built around Russian S-300 systems supplemented by domestically produced Bavar 373 systems created overlapping coverage that would inflict unacceptable losses on any American air campaign. The Pentagon war-gamed multiple scenarios for strikes against Iranian nuclear facilities, and every simulation ended with significant American aircraft losses and failed mission objectives. Iranian defenses were too dense, too redundant, and too sophisticated for the kind of surgical strikes Trump casually threatened. When Trump boasted about having plans to obliterate Iran if necessary, Pentagon planners knew those plans would result in American catastrophe. But the most damning revelation concerns Iranian missile production and stockpiles. Trump repeatedly claimed that sanctions had crippled Iran's ability to produce advanced weapons and that their missile arsenal was dwindling as systems degraded without access to foreign components. The Pentagon knew this was fantasy. Iranian missile production actually increased during the maximum pressure campaign as sanctions forced Iran to complete the indigenization of its supply chains. Unable to import components, Iran developed domestic production capacity for everything from guidance systems to solid rocket fuel. The result was not a weakened missile program, but a more resilient one, immune to future sanctions because it no longer depended on imports. Pentagon estimates now suggest Iran possesses over 3,000 ballistic and cruise missiles of various ranges, with production capacity exceeding 200 missiles annually. These are not the crude scuds of propaganda mythology. These are precision weapons capable of hitting targets across the Middle East with accuracy measured in meters, and Trump knew the numbers even as he lied about Iranian weakness. The Pentagon exposure also reveals the truth about Iran's nuclear program under Trump's maximum pressure. Trump withdrew from the JCPOA, claiming he would negotiate a better deal that would permanently end Iranian nuclear ambitions. Instead, his withdrawal triggered the exact opposite result. Under the JCPOA, Iran's uranium enrichment was capped at 67%, sufficient for civilian power generation, but far below the 90% needed for weapons. Iran's stockpile was limited to 300 kilograms, and advanced centrifuge research was severely restricted. Within 2 years of Trump's withdrawal, Iran had blown past every one of those limits. Current enrichment levels exceed 60%. Stockpiles have grown to over 5,000 kilograms of enriched uranium. Advanced IR-6 and IR-8 centrifuges are now operational, dramatically increasing enrichment efficiency. If Iran chose to sprint toward a nuclear weapon today, Pentagon estimates suggest breakout time has shrunk from 12 months under the JCPOA to potentially less than 2 weeks. Trump's maximum pressure didn't prevent an Iranian bomb. It brought Iran closer to nuclear weapons capability than ever before in history. Now we need to understand why the Pentagon decided to expose Trump's lies now. This is not about bureaucratic revenge or personal animosity. This is about preventing catastrophic war based on false premises. Current Pentagon leadership watched Trump and his allies, including figures like John Bolton and Mike Pompeo, push America toward military confrontation with Iran based on deliberate misrepresentation of Iranian capabilities and American military options. They watched Trump casually threaten strikes that Pentagon war games showed would trigger regional conflagration. They watched him dismiss Iranian military competence even as classified assessments documented Iranian strategic sophistication. Pentagon leaders came to believe that Trump's lies were not just politically problematic, but operationally dangerous. If American political leadership genuinely believes their own propaganda about Iranian weakness, they might launch military operations based on assumptions that will prove catastrophically wrong when Iranian forces respond with capabilities Trump insisted didn't exist. The timing of the exposure also matters. With Trump potentially returning to political power and his allies already calling for military strikes against Iranian nuclear facilities, the Pentagon decided that silence was more dangerous than speaking out. Senior military officials recognized that Trump's return could mean renewed pressure for military action against Iran based on the same false intelligence assessments that characterized his first term. By exposing the lies now, the Pentagon is essentially warning the American public and political establishment that war with Iran would not resemble the easy victory Trump promises. It would be long, bloody, expensive, and strategically indeterminate. Iranian capabilities are real, substantial, and effective. American military advantages are far smaller than propaganda suggests. A war that Trump presents as simple and winnable would actually be America's most challenging military conflict since Vietnam. The exposure also reveals internal Pentagon frustration with decades of politicized intelligence about Iran. Every administration, not just Trump's, has faced pressure to present Iran as weaker and less capable than objective analysis suggests. This politicization serves multiple interests. Defense contractors benefit from exaggerating threats to justify weapon systems while simultaneously downplaying adversary capabilities to maintain confidence in American military superiority. Politicians benefit from presenting enemies as dangerous enough to require action, but weak enough that victory seems assured. Israeli allies benefit from portraying Iran as simultaneously an existential threat requiring American intervention and a paper tiger that would crumble under pressure. The result is schizophrenic intelligence that presents Iran as too strong to ignore but too weak to fear, a logical impossibility that has distorted American strategy for decades. What makes the Pentagon's exposure particularly devastating is the specificity of the contradictions documented. These are not vague differences of interpretation, but direct point-by-point refutations of Trump's specific claims. When Trump said Iranian air defenses were destroyed, the Pentagon shows satellite imagery of fully operational radar systems and missile batteries. When Trump claimed Iranian missile production was crippled, the Pentagon provides manufacturing output data showing acceleration. When Trump insisted the nuclear program was contained, the Pentagon presents enrichment levels and stockpile quantities proving the opposite. This is not a matter of different analytical frameworks reaching different conclusions. This is one side lying and the other side proving it with receipts. The human cost of Trump's lies also features prominently in the Pentagon documents. American service members deployed to the region based their operational planning on Trump's assurances about Iranian weakness. Troops operating in Iraq, Syria, Afghanistan, and across the Gulf believed they faced an enemy with limited precision strike capabilities and degraded military effectiveness. The reality, as Iranian strikes on Ain al-Assad and other incidents demonstrated, was completely different. American forces were more vulnerable than they understood because their commander-in-chief was feeding them lies instead of accurate threat assessments. The traumatic brain injuries from the Ain al-Assad strike, which Trump dismissed as headaches, represented genuine casualties resulting from intelligence failure. Those service members deserved accurate information about the threats they faced, and Trump's lies denied them that fundamental military necessity. The exposure also undermines the entire strategic logic of maximum pressure. Trump and his allies argued that crushing sanctions would force Iran to accept American terms or face internal collapse. The Pentagon documents show that maximum pressure achieved neither objective. Iranian decision-makers, rather than capitulating, doubled down on resistance and strategic patience. They calculated correctly that they could endure economic pain longer than Trump could maintain political support for his confrontational approach. They invested in domestic military production, reducing vulnerability to sanctions. They deepened relationships with China and Russia, creating sanctions-busting mechanisms. They expanded regional influence through proxy forces in Iraq, Syria, Yemen, and Lebanon. Every metric the Pentagon tracked showed Iran growing stronger strategically during the maximum pressure era, not weaker. Trump's policy failed completely, but he never admitted failure. Instead, he lied about Iranian weakness, even as Pentagon analysts documented Iranian strategic success. Perhaps most importantly, the Pentagon exposure reveals that Trump's lies about Iran were not innocent exaggeration, but dangerous deception with strategic consequences. When the American president consistently misrepresents adversary capabilities, several destructive dynamics emerge. First, it creates false confidence among allies, leading them to take actions they believe America will support, but that America actually cannot or will not support when confronted with real costs. Second, it creates credibility problems with adversaries who know the claims are false and therefore discount American threats as bluffs. Third, it distorts domestic political debate by basing policy discussions on factually incorrect premises. Fourth, it sets up potential military disasters when forces encounter capabilities their political leadership insisted didn't exist. Trump's lies about Iran created all four of these problems simultaneously, leaving America weaker and more vulnerable despite all the tough talk. The international reaction to the Pentagon exposure has been telling. American allies in Europe, who never fully supported Trump's withdrawal from the JCPOA and maximum pressure campaign, see validation for their skepticism. They maintain that Trump's approach would strengthen rather than weaken Iran, and the Pentagon documents confirm they were right. This vindication will make future American efforts to build coalitions against Iran significantly more difficult, as allies will remember being right when American leadership was wrong. Gulf Arab states, particularly Saudi Arabia and the UAE, who aligned with Trump's anti-Iran strategy, now face uncomfortable questions about whether they bet on the wrong approach. They invested heavily in the maximum pressure campaign, contributing to sanctions enforcement and supporting American military posture. The revelation that this investment achieved nothing while Iran grew stronger represents strategic failure for Gulf monarchies as much as for Trump. Iranian leadership, for their part, views the Pentagon exposure as confirmation of what they always knew but could not prove. They understood their own capabilities and recognized the gap between Trump's rhetoric and Iranian reality. But having the Pentagon itself confirm Iranian strength while exposing American deception provides tremendous propaganda value. Iranian media is showcasing the documents as proof that the Islamic Republic's resistance strategy works, that American pressure can be endured, and that Iranian military investments have created genuine deterrence. The exposure strengthens hardliners in Tehran who argued against any accommodation with America, proving their contention that American leadership operates in bad faith and cannot be trusted even when presenting intelligence assessments. The political consequences for Trump personally remain unclear but potentially significant. The exposure directly contradicts years of his foreign policy claims and reveals him as either systematically dishonest or profoundly ignorant about one of America's most important national security challenges. Neither option reflects well on his judgment or fitness for leadership. His political opponents will cite the Pentagon exposure as evidence of broader patterns of lying about national security matters. His supporters will likely dismiss it as deep state conspiracy or attack the Pentagon for undermining civilian leadership. The broader American public will probably divide along existing partisan lines, with each side interpreting the exposure through their preferred narrative about Trump. But for informed observers, the Pentagon documents remove any remaining doubt. Trump lied about Iran consistently, deliberately, and dangerously throughout his presidency. The exposure also raises profound questions about intelligence community oversight and accountability. If Pentagon analysts knew Trump was lying about Iran, why didn't they speak out earlier? Why did classified assessments remain hidden while the president made public statements contradicting those assessments? The answer involves complex dynamics of civil-military relations, classification systems that prevent public contradiction of false claims, and career concerns about challenging powerful political figures. The intelligence community saw Trump's lies in real time, but lacked mechanisms to effectively correct the record without appearing to undermine civilian leadership. Only now, with Trump out of office and potentially returning to power, did Pentagon leadership decide that exposing the lies was more important than maintaining institutional discretion. This decision will have lasting implications for how future administrations handle intelligence that contradicts their political messaging. Looking forward, the Pentagon exposure creates several strategic imperatives. First, American policy toward Iran must recalibrate based on accurate assessment of Iranian capabilities rather than politically convenient fantasies. This means accepting that military options are far more limited and risky than Trump-era rhetoric suggested. It means recognizing that maximum pressure failed and that different approaches deserve consideration. It means honest conversation with the American public about what containment, deterrence, or conflict with Iran would actually entail based on Iranian real capabilities rather than imagined weaknesses. Second, the intelligence community needs better mechanisms for ensuring political leadership receives and acts on accurate assessments, even when those assessments complicate preferred narratives. The gap between what Pentagon analysts knew and what Trump claimed was too large and too dangerous to repeat. Third, Congress needs to exercise more rigorous oversight of intelligence politicization, ensuring that classified assessments cannot be systematically contradicted by public claims without accountability. The deeper lesson from the Pentagon exposure concerns the dangers of propaganda believing its own myths. American political culture has spent decades portraying Iran as simultaneously a grave threat and a weak adversary on the verge of collapse. This contradictory narrative served political purposes but bore no relation to reality. Iran is neither the existential threat that justifies unlimited military spending nor the paper tiger that would crumble under pressure. Iran is a mid-level power with significant regional influence, sophisticated asymmetric military capabilities, and strategic patience that has consistently outmaneuvered more powerful adversaries through careful calculation and willingness to endure costs. American strategy based on anything other than this realistic assessment will continue to fail, as Trump's maximum pressure demonstrated. The Pentagon documents also reveal something profound about Iranian strategic culture that American policymakers consistently misunderstand. Iranian decision-makers play long games, measuring success across decades rather than election cycles. They endure short-term pain for long-term strategic positioning. They invest in capabilities that provide asymmetric advantages rather than attempting to match American strengths symmetrically. They build redundancy and resilience into systems rather than optimizing for efficiency. They view negotiation as tactical pause rather than strategic surrender. These characteristics make Iran a uniquely frustrating adversary for American power, which assumes that overwhelming military superiority and economic pressure will force capitulation. Iran refuses to play by those assumptions, and American leaders like Trump, who fail to understand Iranian strategic culture, will continue to misjudge Iranian responses and claim victories that never happened. What we're witnessing with this Pentagon exposure is not just one man's lies being revealed, but the unraveling of an entire false narrative about American power in the Middle East. For decades, Washington has operated under the assumption that American military and economic dominance guaranteed that regional adversaries would eventually submit to American preferences. Iran has systematically proven that assumption wrong. Through strategic patience, military innovation, economic endurance, and regional alliance building, Iran has created a position that American power cannot easily dislodge without costs Washington is unwilling to pay. Trump's lies about weakening Iran were not unique to him, but rather an extreme expression of a broader American delusion about the nature of power and resistance in the Middle East. The Pentagon's decision to expose those lies represents a remarkable admission that the delusion has become too dangerous to maintain. As we move forward, the question is whether American policy will adapt to reality or continue operating based on comfortable fictions. Will decision-makers accept what the Pentagon is now saying openly about Iranian capabilities and adjust strategies accordingly? Or will new leaders simply craft new lies to replace Trump's exposed deceptions? The answer will determine whether America stumbles into yet another disastrous Middle East war based on fantasy, or finally develops Iran policy based on accurate understanding of costs, capabilities, and realistic objectives. The Pentagon has done its part by exposing the truth. Now, the question is whether political leadership has the courage and wisdom to act on that truth rather than retreating into new versions of the same old lies. If you found this analysis valuable, make sure you're subscribed to this channel with notifications turned on. We're one of the few sources willing to challenge establishment narratives with evidence and analysis you won't find on mainstream networks. Share this video with anyone who still believes Trump's version of events about Iran. The truth is out there, documented in the Pentagon's own assessments, and it's time the American people understood just how badly they've been deceived. Drop a comment below sharing your reaction to these revelations. Are you surprised by the gap between Trump's claims and Pentagon reality? Did you suspect all along that the maximum pressure campaign was failing despite official claims of success? Let's build a community conversation around these crucial national security questions. Thanks for watching, stay informed, and I'll see you in the next video where we'll continue exposing the truths that powerful interests want buried.